You ever notice how some rivalries just never die? I mean, you see it in sports all the time, Yankees and Red Sox, Lakers and Celtics, but sometimes it hits close to home. Maybe it's that uncle that you can't have over at Thanksgiving with your other uncle because of something that went down back in 1982. Some fights seem permanently wired in to the world. There's one rivalry on the world stage that makes all the others look like kids arguing over a toy. We're talking full blown state on state war that has the whole world holding its breath. It's easy to look at that and think, well, that's just how it's always been. They're born enemies. But here's what's wild. The fight that feels so permanent today actually started as a friendship. And not just any friendship. The nation that we call Iran is ancient Persia, and they were once Israel's greatest ally and protector. To understand that, we have to go back 2,500 years to one crazy night, to the most arrogant party ever thrown in what was supposed to be the most secure city on earth. In October of 539 BC, the city of Babylon felt absolutely untouchable. Now, Cyrus the Great had his armies camped outside the walls, but King Belshazzar, he wasn't worried. These walls were 80 feet thick, 300 feet high. The Euphrates River flowed right through the middle, so they have endless water. They have 20 years of food stockpiled. Belshazzar figures he's bulletproof, and it looks like it. So what's his response to being under siege? He throws a party. 1,000 of his top guys. The wine's flowing, the music's playing, and then he gets what he thinks is a brilliant idea. It was a terrible idea. I mean, terrible. He tells his servants, go, grab the treasures my grandfather Nebuchadnezzar took from that Jewish temple in Jerusalem. So they bring out these golden cups and bowls, things that were supposed to be set apart, holy, used only for worshiping God. And then he starts toasting to those dead idols that were made of gold and silver. Big mistake. Huge. When it happens, the music stops. The laughter dies. Because a hand, just a hand, with no body attached, it appears out of nowhere, and it began to write on the wall 4 words. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. Daniel chapter 5 tells us what happened to the king. He went white as a sheet. His knees were knocking together. His legs gave out from underneath him. The original language is even more graphic. It suggests that he lost control of his bodily functions in front of all of his guests. Think about it. This king who thought he was a god just peed his pants in front of everyone. No one can read the writing. Finally, the queen mother remembers this old Jewish guy named Daniel. He's about 80 at this time. He's an exile who's known for figuring out things like this. So they drag Daniel in. And when he shows up, he's not the least bit intimidated. He sees the blasphemy. He sees the fear. And he does not hold back. He basically tells the king, you knew your grandfather's story. You saw how God humbled Nebuchadnezzar when he got too big for his britches. And you chose to mock God anyway. So here's your verdict. That writing on the wall, it means God has numbered the days of your kingdom. You've been weighed on the scales, and you have been found lacking. Your kingdom, it's done. Tonight, it's going to the Medes and the Persians. And that very night it happens. Cyrus's engineers divert the Euphrates River. His troops sneak in under the river gates, and the world's greatest city falls without a fight. Belshazzar's dead before sunrise. Now here's where it gets crazy. Because the guy who just conquered Babylon, Cyrus the Great, he's not your typical conqueror. He finds the exiled Jews and he says, you can go home. He gives them money, protection, and returns the very same sacred vessels that Belshazzar had been using for his own party cups. Check this out. The prophet Isaiah wrote about Cyrus by name 150 years before any of this happened. And he calls him something that just blows my mind. He calls him a Messiah, an anointed one. Think about that. A pagan king just got a title reserved for the line of David. So what's the difference between these two guys? It comes down to this. When Persian kings exalt the God of Israel, they flourish. When they oppose him, catastrophe follows. Let's move this mic a little bit. There we go. Do you know what's wild? That pattern held on for centuries. I'm talking all the way into modern times. The nation that used to be Persia was one of Israel's best friends in the Middle East. They weren't just neighbors, they were allies. So what happened? How do you go from Cyrus rolling out the red carpet to a regime whose mission for the last 40 years has basically been to wipe Israel off the map? 1979 changed everything. The Iranian Revolution wasn't just a change of government. It was like someone took the whole country and flipped it upside down. The new guy in charge, Ayatollah Khomeini, he had a different vision. America became the great Satan. Israel, they got promoted to little Satan. Just like that, centuries of friendship went out the window. The new Persian leadership started building what they called the Ring of Fire, sending money and weapons to groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis. Their goal wasn't subtle: destroy Israel. Now, here's where it gets interesting. What are we watching on the news right now? It's like reading Daniel chapter 5 all over again. Think about it. Iran has been throwing a 40-year party of defiance. They've taken what's sacred to God, his promise to protect his people, and they've been using it for target practice. Does that sound familiar? Remember what happened to Belshazzar? The Bible says his strength just left him before the first Persian soldier ever got to the gates. Operation Rising Lion didn't just hit buildings, it broke something. Military analysts are saying that Iran's aura of resistance got shattered overnight. The masterminds behind their whole operation gone, one after another. Belshazzar got weighed on the scales and came up short. Iran, same scales, same result. But remember, there's always two sides to the story. There's judgment, sure, but there's also restoration. There's a Belshazzar, but there's also a Cyrus. So if Iran's leadership is playing Belshazzar, who's playing Cyrus? Who is the leader that God may use, without even knowing it, to restore what got torn down? A lot of folks look at someone like Donald Trump and see those parallels. The Abraham Accords, his support for Israel, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. It reminds them of Isaiah 45. Think about it. Cyrus was a pagan king that God called by anointed one. Why was he called God's anointed one? Because he protected God's people and he helped restore what had been destroyed. Now, history may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And if history's rhyming with what we're seeing today, what does that tell us about tomorrow? And this is where, for a lot of us, the Bible goes from ancient stories to next week's headlines. Way back in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, the prophet lays out this massive end times invasion of Israel. It's led by someone called Gog from a place called Magog. Bible scholars have said that's modern day Russia. And right there on the list, Persia, modern day Iran. Here's the thing. For most of history, Russia and Iran working together seemed unthinkable. But today, they're strategic partners. That's new. And it's got folks familiar with Bible prophecy sitting up and paying attention. Are we watching the Great War begin right now? Or is this the setup? The peace is moving into position. Ezekiel says this happens when Israel is living in peace, in a land of unwalled villages. Peace and safety for Israel seemed impossible. But then came the Abraham Accords. For the first time, Israel made real peace with Arab neighbors. There was this unprecedented calm. Could that have been the peace and safety that the Bible was talking about? The quiet before the storm. Most Bible scholars believe that a third temple has to be built in Jerusalem before Christ returns. But the politics around the Temple Mount are complicated, to put it mildly. Could a massive regional war, one that decisively weakens Iran and its proxies, be finally what clears the way? I know this is a sensitive topic to folks, but it's a critical piece of the prophetic puzzle. Finally, look at how all the other nations are responding. Ezekiel's prophecy is specific about this. When Gog's armies invade, nobody comes to the rescue. Other nations stand on the sidelines. They complain, they ask questions, but they don't fight. Does that sound familiar? The UN is condemning Israel. European allies are calling for restraint because they're tired of getting pulled in. Israel is finding itself more and more alone on the world stage. It's the exact picture Ezekiel painted 2,600 years ago. So we've traced this story from a haunted banquet hall in ancient Babylon to the missile alerts going off today. And we've seen the pattern of pride and judgment. We've watched ancient prophecies cast shadows over modern headlines. But the story doesn't end with me just giving you information. It should leave us wrestling with some hard questions. Daniel chapter 5 gives us two kings. Belshazzar knew God's stories, but he mocked them. Cyrus didn't know God at all, but he became his anointed instrument anyway. If God's judgment fell on the insider who should have known better, and his blessings worked through an outsider who didn't, what does that make us rethink about how God works in the world? Maybe even through leaders and people we'd never expect. The second question is, when you see these ancient prophecies, Russia and Iran allied, a season of peace and safety before the war, the world's nations standing aside while Israel stands alone. When you see all that lining up with today's headlines, it can be fascinating and terrifying at the same time. But what are we supposed to do with that? Does it make us check out in fear, or does it create urgency about how we live and share our faith today? What is the right response when you feel like the prophetic clock is ticking? When you see all these pieces moving on the world stage, all these ancient prophecies seeming to wake up, it'll drive a person to their knees. I pray God raises up modern day Cyrus figures. I pray America stays Israel's friend, a real ally that'll stand with her when everyone else walks away. Cyrus can help in a situation like this. But when I look at my own life, my own heart, I know that even the most powerful political ally can't fix my real problem. My problem needs someone bigger than Cyrus, someone greater. Because the ultimate issue isn't some hostile nation. It's that verdict that was written on a wall in Babylon. A verdict that applies to every single one of us. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. You have been weighed on the scales, and you've been found lacking. It's easy to look at a proud king like Belshazzar and see how he came up short. But here's the truth that sits under everything else. When you measure any of us against God's perfect holiness, we all come up short. Everyone has chosen our own way, messed up, and sinned. And because God is perfectly just, that sin has consequences. It creates a wall between us and Him. That's the bad news. It's the verdict on the wall for all of humanity. But here's why the story of Jesus is called the gospel, which literally means good news. God saw that we were guilty and could never fix the scales on our own. So He did something nobody saw coming. God the Son, Jesus Christ, came to the earth and stepped on those scales for us. He lived the perfect life we've all failed to live, and then He went to a cross. On that cross, Jesus took the punishment we deserve, that judgment, that very presence, the wrath of God was poured out on the innocent Son. He died the death that we should have died. And 3 days later, He walked out of a grave, proving the debt was paid in full, and that death itself was beaten. So what does that mean for you right here, right now? It means you can stop trying to earn your way to God. You can stop hoping your good stuff will eventually outweigh your bad stuff. The scales will never balance that way. The invitation of the gospel is simple. Stop trying so hard and start trusting. Turn away from your sin and your own efforts. That's what repentance really is. And put your faith completely in Jesus Christ. If you're listening today and something in your heart is telling you that you've been trying to balance those scales yourself, if you know you've never really surrendered your life to Christ, I want to invite you to make that decision right now. You can talk to God right here where you are. Tell Him you believe what Jesus did on the cross was for you. It's not about saying magic words. It's about a real decision in your heart. If you make that decision, your verdict changes forever. It's no longer found lacking. Because of Jesus, it becomes forgiven, made right, adopted into God's family. And that's the best and most important news in the world. Hey, I appreciate you going into the conversation. And if you found it helpful at all, like, subscribe, leave a comment. I'll read them. I love to interact. And I believe we can build something here. That sounded kind of cheesy, but I do mean it. Appreciate you watching. God bless you.